All right, here we are. I'm Chris Freeman from Pansy Division.
I'm Jon Ginoli from Pansy Division, and we're here to talk about Deflowered, which is now having its 30th anniversary in 2024. Our
That's
second album
crazy. That's crazy.
came out in June of 94. We went on tour with Green Day in July, and it came out before the tour.
And I remember that while we were on tour, we picked up Spin Magazine because they gave us a review. So
Spin Magazine was important
it
then.
it really was actually. It was very influential at the time. Let's talk a little bit about the aftermath. So we had the first record out, Undressed, and we did our tour. So now that we were sort of seeing who was actually buying the records, because we were getting mail from kids and people who were buying that first record, talk about how that changed what you were singing about, or maybe added more of certain types of songs.
We're in our 30s, or early 30s when we were starting the band. We thought this is going to be a band for grown-ups. When we made the first album, we had barely played outside of San Francisco, where we had a good following at home. But when we went out on tour in the fall of 93 for Undressed, we had an audience. We had a lot more kids in the audience than we were expecting, teenagers listening to us, but we're on a label that a lot of teenagers listen to, look out. And then we ended up, after Deflowered came out, on tour with Green Day, where it was nothing but teenagers. But we weren't aiming for teenagers. But we knew that a lot of teenagers were writing us letters to our post office box. So I felt the need to sort of address them, which a few songs on this album do. It's a more confident record than our first record. I think the songwriting's really good pretty much all the way through. I still think the album sounds really good, but it sounds a little more indie and a little less punk than I was remembering. But we're a punk band, yes, but we're an indie band. So we're not trying to rehash the Ramones constantly, which was a pretty common problem in the early 90s with the sort of punk revival. So they're an influence of ours. We covered them on our first album, but here it's a little less.
Right. I wanted to go back and talk about Liam's involvement.
In 94, we didn't have a drummer. We'd gone through several, and Patrick Hawley, who played on the first record, lived in Illinois and would not move to California to be in the band, much to our dismay. So we had several live drummers, and then we ended up getting Liam Hart to play on the album. And he is a really solid drummer, not a punk drummer. But I remember my instructions to him. Just keep going. No start, stop stuff. Don't make it real dynamic, because that is exactly the flavor of the moment. We recorded this album in the spring of 94. The thing that was really big was grunge. Nirvana were 3 years into their explosive career, and I didn't want our album to be stuck in that place in time. That, I think, also set us apart from our peers, certainly our peers on our label. But I was going for something that was steady. I wanted steady and consistent drumming. And it does have excitement, but I wanted it to be even and not have these sort of fake urgent dynamics. But he
So
did a really good job on the album.
he did. He did exactly kind of what you thought. I think he kept it
Yeah.
very straight and simple. And we recorded 21 songs with him. I mean, that was a ball buster of a session.
Yeah, we did
And
a
I
lot of
remember
work with
it
him.
was an assembly line. We were really trying to get it
We
out
were
the
very
door
well
quick.
rehearsed,
Yeah.
and we had been playing some of them live,
Yep.
and we knew what we wanted, and we were very efficient.
Yeah. And Liam was the perfect choice for being efficient, I thought. He did a great job. He ended up not wanting to be in the band. I think he played 3 shows with us. He
He was
just
a little
said,
nervous about some of the lyrics because
yeah. And he just could not foresee a future of playing these songs in front of people. He just couldn't do it. And I remember that same leap when I first joined Pansy Division. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to have to sing these songs in front of people.
yeah.
But he just couldn't, even from behind the drum set, I know he couldn't do it. Also, maybe a little bit about the artwork. I know the one disappointment we had was when the album got into our hands and we opened it up and went, Oh my God.
Why
What
is there a
happened with
black border around?
why the black border? We were so annoyed with Lookout
Because
for
we
that.
had approved the artwork. The artwork did not have a black border around it, and then the album comes out with a black border. It's like, why? There were
Why?
several instances like that that Lookout could not explain why the artwork we approved got changed or
We
altered
wanted to
somehow.
bleed over the edges like the
Yeah.
first album did and like the other albums we've done since then. It's the same photographer, Mark Geller, who did the first album.
Marcus Ewart has been on 3 of our album covers.
Those pajamas,
Got
but
repurposed on other album covers of
at
ours.
least 2 other album covers besides this one.
So the cover was my idea. The record is dirty and sweet. I wanted to have a sweet looking album cover, but it's sexy too. It's my favorite cover of all of the ones that we've had out.
On the inside of the album, not only did you put condom instructions on there, updated with pictures this time. Below there, you listed all these phone numbers and addresses because we were realizing that a lot more of our audience was young. So this
These
was
were all the lesbian, gay, bisexual youth groups in America that I could find in 1994 before the internet had all these things at your fingertips. And I remember having to talk to some activists who gave me a lot of this info. And then, you know, the condom description, the what is safe sex section, and then the lyrics. So,
and then did you also do the song by song elevator speech on each
song
one
by
of those?
song breakdown. It's very short, like a sentence for each song.
So once again, like we did with the last album, we're going to go through all the songs and give you our updated elevator speech. So we're going to go
15 songs
in album order. So we're going to start with side one, cut one, which is Reciprocate.
Reciprocate to me seemed like a really obvious kind of topic that I don't remember hearing in a song. So that was my inspiration. And I thought, is this the thing that gay guys know that straight people don't? I mean, that's oversimplifying it, but gay guys knew about reciprocation. But the song's about somebody who didn't. So
Right.
It's kind of a complaint and an urge to reciprocate in bed. So it was a fun song, but it had this serious undertone. So it's really a sexual politics kind of song, if you want to put it that way.
And this was a song that on the Green Day tour we used to our advantage because it was the one where we would say, hey, girls, tell those guys go down or go home.
You know, that line's not in the song. It probably should have been, but the album came before the tour, not after. So.
Okay, and now Groovy Underwear, a
Groovy
song that
Underwear is just one of our funnest, silliest, most joyful songs. We stopped doing it at a certain point, and I miss it. But it's silly, but it's just about liking crotches and underwear, and it just what turned me on. I wanted to sing about it. I remember writing this song when I went back to Illinois to visit, sleeping on someone's floor and waking up in the morning with this idea for the song in my head. I just woke up and wrote down the song and put music to it later.
well, it is insanely catchy to the point where you can find a video of Green Day singing it because we would play it every night on that tour and they started singing it to themselves. So later, when we were doing it with Patrick and Luis, we were putting in bits of other songs into the middle to stretch it out a little bit. So I think we were doing Bop by Hanson and Believe by Cher later on too.
That's right. I forgot that.
Yeah.
Oh, God. What fun.
Now, this song was probably one of the fastest songs, the
Banana.
next song that we had done to that point. And I remember with Liam, it was breakneck, trying to get all the way through a take.
This is the punkiest song on the album, for sure. It's a real life experience about being in a gropey mosh pit that happened at a club called the Chameleon, one of the places we used to play early on in the early 90s in SF. And this event happened at a fastback show. And I just remember this guy bumping into me, rubbing his butt up against me. And I was just like, okay, this guy's into me. So, you know, I was doing the same thing back to him. So I thought, okay, well, after this show is over, I'm going to go talk to him. And then when I did after the show, he wouldn't even look at me. So that was my like, oh, you know, they'll fool around with you as long as it's anonymous, as long as they don't have to talk to you.
Right.
I've had other experiences along those lines too, or heard about them from other people. So I thought, okay, that's a good topic for a song.
So the next song is a song about a certain area of a certain town that somebody in the band might live in.
I lived in LA for less than a year when I first moved to California. And Fluffy City is about my experience in West Hollywood, which is full of gay bars and dance clubs. And, I'm really proud to be gay, but there are aspects of gay culture that drive me up the wall. And the sort of body beautiful phoniness is one of them. And it's rampant, or was rampant. I don't know what West Hollywood's like nowadays. I haven't been there in 20 years. But this was sort of my humorous complaint about a certain aspect of the gay scene. It could have been the first song on the album. We played this one for a long time.
A long time. I think we were actually opening the sets with it for a while.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of the best songs I ever wrote.
And, honestly, WeHo hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's still all that.
I love the Cramps. The Cramps are a big influence on me. And I used to think, I could really go over the top and try to sell these songs like Lux Interior of the Cramps did. And I thought, people already sometimes criticize us as being cartoony. I'm not going to go full Lux Interior. So I sang a lot of the songs on this album with more restraint than we did later when we played them live. In some ways, I think that makes them age better. I don't know. I tried to articulate the words very clearly, and live that's not always possible.
Right.
But yeah, Fluffy City, it's a critique. And at the same time, it's like, I'm part of it too. I'm part of that scene. But those are the aspects of the scene that bug me.
And now we're at my first song for Pansy Division, James Bondage. Yes.
So I remember when we were rehearsing out by Balboa Park Bart in San Francisco that we were leaving practice and you uttered the phrase James Bondage. And I turned around and said, you need to write that song. Because you were talking then about wanting to write songs for the band, because on the first two albums, I wrote everything except this song. So I thought that's a good song for you to write. And your first song was so great. So it really...
We're still playing it today. It's crazy.
Still are.
It's a very similar Jon Ginoli chord progression played backwards. And the inspiration was, at the time I was seeing an airline pilot who was into S&M and bondage. I was not, by the way. And I was always the top because I just don't want any pain involved in sex. To me, that's no. But we kind of had a little bit of a rule about maybe we shouldn't be doing songs where we're doing something to somebody else. It'd be better if it was mutual or if we were talking about somebody doing something to me. So for the song, I had to switch the position and make it be that, I was the bottom and James Bondage. But yeah, very interesting song because I've never really been into it. And after I broke up with him, I never did it again.
It's a performance, and you perform it so well. And, but 2 albums later, I had the response to James Bondage, which was Vanilla.
Right.
Which is me. So after we did Vanilla, we'd play them back to back.
And this was also the time when we started using sound effects on certain things or taking little sound bites from things. So at the beginning of this is a piece from a toy commercial, like an Erector set commercial from the 60s. And remember, boy, you control the action. And I thought, oh man, that doesn't fit this song. And then after that
is Negative Queen, which is a cousin of Fluffy City. But if Fluffy City is LA, Negative Queen was San Francisco. It has some specific to San Francisco references. When I moved to San Francisco, the Castro district was where you would put up flyers for all the gay dance events, all the gay bars that were having special nights, and bands would put up flyers. And then at a certain point, people came through and started razor blading all the posters off the poles, saying it's to keep the shopping district clean. These posters are just so messy and they fall off the poles and they get on the ground and it's a mess. And it's like...
They were called the Golden Broom.
Golden Broom. They wanted to clean up the act of the Castro. That's how I ended up writing Negative Queen. The other thing is that when I came out before I got to San Francisco, I was just puzzled when I started meeting gay people and they were so mean to each other. You had to have a tough skin, and I don't think that really is true anymore. Negative Queen was just another aspect of that.
Yeah. And then later on, we actually played a show in Chicago where the power went out because it was so hot that summer of '95. We couldn't play our show that was booked for the Metro. So
Mhm.
we went outside and we started singing songs a cappella, and that was one of the songs.
There were people on the street because they showed up for the show and they couldn't get in the venue. So we tried to entertain them, and we ended up recording the a cappella version later on. But the amazing thing about playing this song again, I play a guitar solo on it. I think it's the only song that, because I'm not a lead guitar player. I've tried to do it live. I really didn't do very well, but this is where I played a very simple solo at the end of the song. I'm like, wow, I played a guitar solo. So the last song on side one was Denny. This is one of the songs that I wrote thinking, oh, we're singing about safe sex. We're singing all these pro-sex anthems, but it's the age of AIDS. And I wanted to find a way to deal with that. So I was contemplating how to write about that and still have it be a Pansy Division song. My friend Trevor, who is a poet, gave me a book of his poems. And there's a poem in it called Denny about somebody who is HIV positive and not doing well, having a hard time. And I read it and I thought, this has the tone that I want. But it wasn't really a song. So I took the lyrics apart and put them back together. And the lyrics in the song, about half of them are the original poem and the other half are mine. And I deliberately set it up so that, Pansy Division song, you think you know what you're going to get. So the beginning of the song, the first part of the first verse is lighthearted. There's even kind of a joke in there. And then suddenly the mood turns and the song just kind of takes the knife out and just stabs you. So it's got this humor, but it's also probably the darkest song that we've done. And I thought that using that technique to sort of set up the song and then turn it around was the way to introduce it to our audience. And it's one of the songs that I'm proudest that we've done. And last year in 2023, it was covered by the musician and artist Taylor Mack, M-A-C, Taylor Mack. If you don't know who he is, you need to see his movie, Taylor Mack's 24-decade history of popular music. And he does a version of Denny that is devastating. We haven't had many people cover our songs, so I'm really glad to have somebody cover it who really gets it, who really did an incredible version of it. It's also a very short song. It's 2 minutes and 33 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's really to the point. It's not drawn out. It just arrives and it hits you. For me, it's a very successful song and a very successful recording. I used to play it live, sometimes solo, in the middle of our set, where I do one song by myself. So there's a version of it, just me playing it solo on Pile Up, the next album.
So Denny finishes off side one, and side two opens up with what could possibly be my very least favorite Pansy Division song. And I think at the time I was even lobbying to keep it off, but I didn't feel I had the clout at that point to say no. But in hindsight, it didn't blossom. The song did not blossom.
No, it's the weakest song on the album. And we put it first song on side two, so I really must have liked it at the time.
Well, it's got a good intro. Remember we did that later to better effect with Who Treats You Right.
Well, this is sort of our glam rock song, the way it sounds. So it doesn't really sound like our other songs either. I like puns. I've written some good puns. This isn't one of them, I don't think. And it's kind of a long song.
Yeah.
So, we didn't play this much. Of all the songs on this album, this one probably got played the least.
Because we were realizing when we were playing it, it just wasn't going over as well.
Right.
People were rolling their eyes and kind of wandering off rather than being engaged. So now we have Beer Can Boy.
Beer Can Boy is one of the most graphic songs that I've written. inspired by true events. Back when I lived in Illinois, there was an Illinois farm boy. And I said, that thing's as thick as a beer can. I'm never going to get that in my mouth. Somehow I did. And he was one of the first guys that I ever slept with, probably one of the first 10. And I've never seen a thicker one since then in all my years. So it was inspiration. But this was definitely a case of, oh, we got away with a lot on our first album. What can we get away with on our second album?
True.
Does it go too far? Maybe. It's pretty raunchy. It's pretty out there, but it's a fun song.
And then it's followed up with Kissed, which is my first co-writing, I think.
I listened to this album before we did this, and it's like, it's Ginoli Freeman. I don't remember what you contributed to it. Do you?
Well, yeah, when it goes to the disinterested kiss of that chord progression in there, that's what I did. Was because you had it doing the same chord progression.
Oh, okay.
I said, how about if we go? It needed that extra change around, I thought.
Yeah, it was a really good idea. For the first time when I was 32, I went to Europe and backpacked around for a month, and I thought of the lyrics, and I had a notebook with me, so I just wrote them down on the spot. And later, when I got back to San Francisco, wrote some music to it. We played the song for a long time.
It's one of my favorites.
And I did have a friend who did not like to kiss, and a guy that I'd been with a few times who's still a friend of mine. And I was just, a few years ago, I said to him, do you still not like to kiss? He's like,
You did not.
I did. And he said, no, I enjoy it now. But when we were first together, which would have been before the band started, he didn't want to kiss, and I just carried that around with me thinking, that's weird that he didn't want to do it. And it wasn't because he had some issue of masculinity or being gay or something. He was just like, ooh, drool. And I'm like, oh, Jesus.
Wow.
It has a sample at the beginning from my own Private Idaho, River Phoenix.
Yeah, River Phoenix. And then that's followed up by a cover song, which I think this is the first actual cover song that is on one of our albums.
Yeah. Well, unless you count Rock and Roll Queer Bar, which is half cover, rewritten. A Song of Remembrance for Old Boyfriends is a Jonathan Richman song. I've been a big Jonathan Richman fan. I've met him several times. He stayed at my house once on a tour. And I heard this song on a bootleg. He's never released it. There's all these early Modern Lovers songs that came out on live albums in the 90s, stuff recorded in the 70s. And this song is from that group, but it's never come out. So I really wanted to do the song. It's a really naked, touching song. It's very vulnerable, but it had never been out. So Jonathan Richman was coming to San Francisco right after we'd recorded it, but the record wasn't out yet. And I said, look, I wanted to tell you that we did this song of yours. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. That's fine. Once you put a song out there, anybody can do it. I said, well, I know, but you never really put it out. So do you mind? And, I'm gay, so we changed the gender. And he's like, no, that's fine. So that was good. I don't think he's going to make a fuss, but it's good to get your permission from somebody that you are a big fan of. So that was nice. So the drums come in about 90% of the way through the song. So it's really a bare bones production.
The next one, we're still playing this one to this day also. I think this is such a great song with the type of urgency that I think a lot of people feel when they're coming from small towns. So that's Deep Water.
Deep Water was a song that once I realized that high school kids were listening to us, I wanted to write a song for high school kids. So I put myself back in the frame of mind that I had when I was in high school, which was a pretty awful time for me. It was pretty depressing. So I wanted to be honest about that, but also be hopeful, because that is the truth. There's always hope. But the way I felt in high school was just like, high school's never going to end. I've got 2 more years. That's forever. I mean, when you're that age, a year just seems like it takes so long. So I tried to make it up-tempo. The chord progression is really simple, but it's really good and really effective.
It's deceptive, though, because there's some changes in there that are not normal.
Yeah.
But it's got that great break in the middle that just feels like that moment when you've gotten so frustrated where you're just going to throw a chair.
Hmm.
And it's that dun, 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 that just feels so urgent right there. Like you're kicking something over. You're just frustrated.
We've played that song probably every show the last 30 years.
Yeah,
So that
very
that's one
close.
that I'm always happy to play. I always look
Yeah.
forward to playing it when it comes up on the set list.
Yep. I agree. And it actually ended up on a film soundtrack for the movie Angus. And that was thanks to Green Day because they were sort of curating that collection of people who ended up on the soundtrack for that. And it paid for our van at the
Yeah,
time.
we
This
needed a new
song,
van.
we
So
did. We
yeah,
were,
it came on that soundtrack. That just bought us a new van.
it really
Um,
did.
so
Um,
track
and then
13.
previously recorded by The Outnumbered.
The band I had in Illinois, The Outnumbered, did it on the third album that came out in '88. This is one of my favorite songs that I've written. It was written about a friend of mine who, again, I'm still friends with. I'm good at maintaining friendships. And he was somebody I wanted to date, and there's just no way that was ever going to happen. And he's bi, and he's married to a woman now. And he knows it's about him. He's proud of that. But the song's about how elusive he is. The Outnumbered version is very different than the Pansy Division version.
We actually changed it up quite a bit at one point.
When Patrick joined, it got a great guitar solo.
Yeah,
But
sure.
we didn't play the solo on it. There was a very different guitar solo on the Outnumbered version.
Right.
And the Outnumbered version is 2 minutes longer. So it's worth comparing. You want to go on Bandcamp and look up the Outnumbered and look up the original.
The next song was one of my very favorites to play on the Green Day tour.
So this is a song about trying to be self-sufficient sexually if you're sexually frustrated. And this is the rawest song on the album. It really, listening to it again, it's like, oh man, we should have done a few more that were just this raw guitar tone wise.
Yeah.
The drums sound fantastic on this song too. And now we come to the last song on the album, which is another cover, Homo Sapien by Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks. Is a longtime favorite of both Chris and I. And it was a song we both heard at the time when we were coming out. And it is a really important song. What's interesting about it, the original, is that, it's got a drum machine that is very early 80s, but it also has acoustic guitars all the way through it. It's a very rich sounding record as opposed to a lot of the very thin early electro sounding songs. I always thought it was a great song, a great lyric, and wanted to do a version of it from the beginning of the band. But, I wanted to do it Buzzcocks style. So the song actually rips off the riff of the song Breakdown by the Buzzcocks and throws it on top of Homo Sapien, which we play about as fast as we can. The Shelley version's a little over 4 minutes. Ours is 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And it's just like, let's just steamroll this mother. We did it so fast, it was hard to sing live. But, this is how I wanted. I love the version that exists, but I wanted a Buzzcocks version. So if they weren't going to do it, well, we'll do it that way. And I met Pete Shelley after we had done the song and got to hang out with him in San Francisco once. And I asked him, how come the Buzzcocks never did Homo Sapien? He's like, the Buzzcocks rehearsed it, but then we broke up. But when they got back together, they didn't do it. Wish they had.
Yeah. And we've actually got a couple different versions of this. One of them ended up as a B-side to Touch My Joe Camel. And David
That was the first attempt. And then Liam was stronger on the drums for the fast song, though I know this tested his limits too.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah.
But he held it together. So yeah, there's the dry run, which we put out. And then we thought, we can do it better. So we did it better for the album.
Yeah. So that's the full album.
Yeah.
But on the same session with Liam, we recorded 21 songs. So not only...
But we're not going to talk about them today because they're all on our next album. Which came out in 1995, Pile Up. So when we get to that, we'll talk about the rest of those.
All right. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for listening and watching.
Bye-bye.